our...
When? Sorry. When?
I couldn't give you a specific time period.
Because I think
before like sophisticated societies start to develop, so even like medieval stages. It's a long time.
Because men, I'm saying I don't think it was ever equal because men always had to protect women.
But that doesn't mean that the woman's position is less valued. It's valued. It's valuable in a different way.
I'm saying they did different things.
No one's talking about
but
like no one's talking about what's more valuable or what's less valuable.
But both are valuable.
Both are valuable. Yeah, nobody's saying women like what they do isn't valuable. What we're saying is men and women are different,
Right.
and you can't undo biology. And I don't know why you would want to change something that's worked for thousands and thousands of years. So it's like, don't you think it's a bit arrogant to come in and don't you think it's a bit arrogant to come in and say you know better than like thousands of years of people?
I think it's more the rigidity I'm talking about, the rigidity of the roles that we are expected to be in a certain.
But to me,
no flexibility or fluidity.
So to me, like I've always been told I can do anything, and I could be like I could start a business, I could do what I want. I've never been pushed into roles, and if anything, I've seen more backlash for women that go into traditional roles than women that act more modern. So I don't think society's really pushing women to be traditional anymore.
I know, and I definitely agree with that because it is pushing women to be more professional, because in capitalism, where your value comes from, not by everyone, but people see you in a higher status if you earn more money. You earn no money looking after children unless you're a nanny. And when you look at the salary of a nanny compared to a banker, you know, it's not. And that's why women feel like they need to go off and like succeed and become a valuable member of society, because they don't feel like having a baby is enough to be valued, which is so depressing.
But why does it? Shouldn't it only matter if your husband values you? Who cares what society thinks?
Everyone. That's like humans care what other humans think. Like that's like how to stay in a society, to not get kicked out of one, to die
you're
right. You actually care what other people think, and you want to make sure that
but you need to pick the people whose opinions you actually value, right? You can't just value everyone's opinions, because at the end of the day, people's lives, their lifestyle is a reflection of the opinions that they have. So if you don't want this person's lifestyle in future, then you really shouldn't be internalizing their opinions, because you will be doing yourself a massive disservice.
Very difficult.
There's a certain level of consciousness that requires that as well, which is like an incredibly privileged space to be in, because if you are living in survival mode effectively, which a lot of people are, then you don't have the conscious awareness to make those decisions. You're going to keep falling into those survival patterns because you can't physically step out of that. You don't have the choice to. And because of different systemic pressures, so many different factors contributing to that.
Do you know
Sorry, I just have no idea what you just said.
I would argue from personal experience.
I don't know what that means.
I would argue from personal experience that's incorrect. Like when I left home when I was 17 and it was all about survival, I really couldn't care less what anyone thought about me. The only people whose opinions I cared about were people who had the lifestyle I wanted to have in future. And that was it. Like if you don't have the lifestyle I want in 3 to 5 years, or, you know, the results you have in this particular field of discussion isn't desirable to me, then I have no choice but to disregard your opinion, because I'll be doing myself a massive disservice ultimately.
But it's such a privilege to have...
no, it's not a privilege.
It's a privilege to know people that you want to be like. Not everyone is in like a community where they can look up to someone who is a positive influence of what you want to be. Yeah. And like, I get when you're an adult, you've got a choice where you live, but at the end of when you're growing up, like you only know what you know.
Yeah, but I became that influence for myself. That's the unfortunate.
Do you think it's a privilege to be born in 2022, where you're richer than most people, even the richest people were in all of human history? So even like poor people today are richer than people were in most of history.
You never know, because you don't know what it's going to be like in 20 years.
But we know what's gone on the last like 4,000. And so you could say being born in 2022 is much better than being born during the plague.
Yeah, you could say that.
You could just go on YouTube and find
so it's all about perspective, right? Because like if anything, everybody's privileged in 2022.
But I think one of the reasons why people are the most depressed in these days and times, because we take the most antidepressants, we're the most anxious, we're the most depressed in the West, is because we have put expectations upon ourselves, right, which are basically unrealistic, and so we get upset. And, you know, we get depressed by the fact that we can't actually reach those expectations. Whereas, you know, if you go back to the 60s, 50s, 40s, people were happier. Because people talk about, especially when it comes to women, right? People talk about, oh, women they never had any rights, and they had to, you know, ask men for everything. They were happier. They were on less antidepressants. They were less anxious. There was less anxiety. There were less mental illnesses in the DSM.
Yes, but that's because feminine mental illness was defined as hysteria, and women were sent to like get electroshock therapy because they were emotional, and that's any kind of mental illness was defined as that. It's not because it wasn't present; it's because we didn't have the words to define it or explain it.
There were instances of that.
A lot.
To use it as the general rule is a misnomer.
There were a lot more than instances of it. That was the majority of women who expressed any sort of emotionality beyond the point of what was expected were defined as having hysteria and were required, or a witch burned at the stake for literally being
melancholy.
You're going back to like 17, like
no, this is the 1900s, the 1900s, early 1900s.
I'm talking about when you said you were a witch. Like you were a witch. We're going back like
no, but we're going back.
We're going back to Salem time.
Hysteria is an extension of that. Like we have a history of like separating that part from society, the mental ill, even the feminine from society, and kind of that darker side of the feminine that's not really understood. It's demonized and it's pushed out. So hysteria was defined, and just because there's more words for it now.
The darker side of the feminine. What do you mean by that?
So this is a whole thing that I have a theory about. So it was kind of what I was saying about the Madonna and the whore, how we separate the two qualities of the feminine, where there's the extremely sexual and there's the extremely pure, and then society has a way of kind of dictating and governing that because it's difficult to understand how they can coexist together. So in terms of like when a woman does things that aren't really understood, she's a witch, or if she's overly emotional, which isn't understood by the masculine, typically. No, I'm not saying
what
that's
do you
like
mean,
a general rule.
Going on a show with the guy that you just had sex with?
I'm not specifically referring to that instance. All right, I'm like,
I'll give her hysteria. I'll give it to her.
But it's we tend to exaggerate.
In the station and then going back to your boyfriend and letting him eat you out. Yeah, that's witch type behavior.
The issue is we exaggerate those sides of ourselves, and we're pushed to. And I'm not making an excuse for it at all, because I agree it's not great behavior. Right. But it's because we've been pushed to align ourselves with one side, either hypersexual or hyperpure, and it's because it's been constantly separated over time that we have to align ourselves with one. And I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm not saying that's good at all, but it happens, and I think it takes a certain level of consciousness to be able to step out of that, which not a lot of people have access to.
So to me,